Welcome to Caddy Garage. My brakes have been squeaking while I've been driving, so I know it's time to change them. So that's what today's video is going to be about. Now, if you're hearing a grinding sound while you're braking, that's also an indication that you need to change those rear brakes, and sometimes even the front brakes make that noise. But let's get started and we'll show you how easy it is to do. Let's go. As you can see, we've already jacked up my car. We've got it propped up with a jack stand and we've taken the tire off. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this caliper. It's pretty easy. There is a 14mm bolt at the top. There's one on the bottom. So all I need to do is have this socket, get it nice and on there. And I've already loosened it a little bit before we started shooting, to be honest. So all I got to do is once you get it loose, you can just take it off with your hand at that point. And there's two of them that look like that. So just take those off and then we'll move on to the next step. Now those bolts are off, so you don't want this to hang. So you'll just slide it off and then find a good spot. I find right up here is a good place where it's going to stay put. Now that the caliper's off, we're going to remove the caliper bracket. Once again, there are two bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom, both 14mm as well, that we will use our ratchet to remove. Those bolts were on there pretty tight, so I ended up having to use a cheater bar to loosen them. But then once I got them off of there, this comes off pretty easy. And now let's check out those brake pads. So I've got this flipped on the side so you can see the little edges that the pad can go out. I'm just going to slip my fingers in between here and push it up and out. So look at that. This has been worn to the bone. I've got my money's worth out. This is what a new brake pad looks like. As you can see, it was definitely time. Now we can take our rotor off, and there are two Phillips head screws on here, and we're going to use this power drill with a pretty decent sized Phillips head on there. You want to get it seated in there well, make sure it fits, back it up, and then loosen it up, and do the same for this top side. Get it seated in there good, back it up. You can take those out. Let me get that one a little bit looser. Now we're ready for the next step. So the screws are out, but as you can see, the rotor's still on there pretty good. Sometimes you can just pull it off with your hand. Other times, it takes a little rubber mallet. So I'm just gonna Now to get this rotor off, make sure your parking brake is off. Don't ask me how I know. And most of the time you can just wiggle it off, like that. So we're going to spray this rotor with some brake cleaner because it's got a protective film on it that comes with it when you ship it. So just give it a quick spray and give it a wipe down, because you don't want that protective film to hit your brake pads at all while it's on your car. Same thing for the other side. So the new rotor does not come with the little rubber plug that goes right here. So on your old rotor, just take a flathead and pop it out, and then pop it in your new one. So we're going to put our rotor back on. It's really important that you line up these beveled holes with the holes for your screws. So if you want this thing moves, so I recommend getting it at the 9 and 3 o'clock position. So that way you can line that up. Having some trouble. There we go. And get it on. So replace your retainer screws and don't put too much torque on because they strip really easily. So that's good. So the new brake pads come with new brake pad clips. So to remove it, all you do is just take your thumbs and pop it off. Then the new clip, you'll want to line it up like that, give a little bit of overlap on each side, push in the middle, and then push down towards the bottom, and you should be in. Before we put the brake pad back in the caliper, we're going to use a little bit of disc pad grease just on the ends here, like that. Clean my finger here. And then we're going to put it back in. This is going to line up with this, and just slide it below. Be really careful not to touch a lot with that grease, and you're gonna have to kind of shimmy it in to get it to slide in there. And then, like I said, you're gonna have to work with it a little bit to get it to slide in there really good, like that. We got both pads in, and I want to point out two things to you. First of all, notice there's a lot of space in between. You want the pads in just enough to where they don't fall out, and you don't want them touching each other. So about like this is good. Second thing is, you'll want to make sure that when you're taking your brake pads off, pay attention to one has a clip, one doesn't have a clip. So when we reviewed the video from before, on the side that the bolts go in, this clip was on there. So just pay attention to that when you're taking them off. I should have mentioned that earlier, but it's an important thing to keep track of. So we're ready to bolt this bracket back on. Just get everything lined up. Hold that in place. We'll get our bolts, and I'm just gonna start them by hand just to keep this in place, and you'll want to jiggle around a little just to line up your holes. There we go. So before we put the caliper back on, we are going to use a C-clamp to push this piston in as far as we can, because of course the new brake pads have more material on there, so we need to make some room. So what you'll want to do is tighten the C-clamp little by little. I would take the cap off your brake fluid reservoir to make sure it's not going to spill out, because if it is, you may have to take some out. So just do a little at a time and then go check. So that's about as far as I could get it to go. So let's see if we can get it over these brake pads. You may have to jiggle that on a little bit. And it looks like that fits pretty good. So let's get these bolts in there and we are good. Well, that's it for this side. Now we won't film the other side because it's the exact same thing. One thing we do recommend is that before you drive your car, after you replace both sides, is pump your brakes, I'd say maybe a dozen times, just to make sure those brake pads get into the proper place to start working the way they need to. Otherwise, I hope that you found this video helpful, and thanks for watching.